The theater was almost empty when the evening began. The golden lights above cast a soft glow over the red velvet seats, and the quiet hum of the projector filled the silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like something is about to happen. The air held a strange weight, and if anyone had been paying close attention, they might have felt it too. Keanu Reeves and Ana de Armas walked quietly down the center aisle, their steps soft, almost hesitant. They thought no one would notice. They thought this moment was theirs alone, hidden in the shadows of the dim cinema. Keanu, with his calm presence, carried himself in the same humble way he always did, but there was a softness in his eyes as he glanced toward Ana. Ana smiled back, a smile filled with warmth, but also a quiet fragility, as though she was carrying her own private storm inside. They sat together, choosing seats in the very center row. It was not about hiding, but about wanting a space where they could just be people, not faces. Everyone knew. Keanu leaned slightly closer to Ana, not in a way that shouted romance, but in a way that spoke of comfort, of trust. The way two people sometimes share silence, and in that silence, they find something deeper than words. What they did not know was that Sandra Bullock had entered the same theater. She had slipped in quietly, almost as though drawn by an invisible thread. Sandra had no plan, no expectation, only the desire to watch a film and enjoy a quiet night. Yet fate has a strange way of bringing people into places where emotions are tested, where truths appear at the most unexpected time. The first minutes of the movie passed, but Sandra was not watching the screen. Her eyes had fallen on the familiar, silhouettes sitting in the row ahead of her. She blinked, at first unsure if what she was seeing was real. Her heart beat faster, each second louder than the last, like a drum echoing through her chest. She leaned forward ever so slightly, her breath caught in her throat. Yes, it was them. Keanu and Ana sitting together, shoulders nearly touching, their faces turned softly toward one another as if sharing a quiet world that no one else could enter. Sandra froze. A rush of emotions flooded through her. Surprise, confusion, and something she could not name. She had known Keanu for years, through ups and downs, through laughter and tears. There was history between them, unspoken but powerful. She admired him not just as a friend, but as someone who carried kindness in his every step, humility in his every word. And now, to see him like this, quietly sharing a space with Ana, struck her in ways she was not ready for. But Sandra was not someone who judged quickly. She sat back, her heart racing, and tried to steady her thoughts. Respect was important to her, and so was kindness. She knew everyone carried their own untold story. Maybe this was part of Keanu's. Maybe this was part of Ana's. Still, the theater no longer felt like a place for escape. It felt like a stage where silence carried more weight than dialogue, where every glance meant something deeper. Keanu whispered something to Ana, his voice low but filled with gentleness. Ana's eyes shimmered as she listened, her lips curving into a faint smile, though her fingers trembled slightly as she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Sandra caught this tiny detail, and it struck her. Why tremble? Was it nervousness, fear of being seen, or perhaps something else, something hidden? The movie played on, but for Sandra, the real story was unfolding in front of her. Her mind raced back to moments with Keanu, moments when he had shown her a kind of friendship rare in their world. There was a time years ago when Sandra had felt broken, lost in the noise of fame and expectation. Keanu had been there, not with grand speeches, but with quiet support. He had brought her coffee without asking, listened without interrupting, and reminded her that kindness is not about big gestures, but about being present when someone needs it most. Now, sitting in the dim glow of the theater, Sandra wondered what he was offering to Ana in this moment. Perhaps the same kindness. Perhaps the same quiet presence. But the question burned inside her. Why here? Why now? And why so hidden? Suspense hung heavy. Sandra shifted in her seat, debating whether to stay or to leave. But her heart told her to wait. There was something about this scene that felt unfinished, like a chapter that had just begun. Keanu leaned closer again, his voice a soft whisper. Anna's face turned toward him, and for the briefest second, Sandra saw something raw in her expression. It was not just happiness. It was not just closeness. It was something tangled, as if joy and fear were fighting inside her at the same time. And then, just as Sandra thought she could take no more, Anna reached for Keanu's hand. It was a simple act, but in its simplicity it carried weight. Sandra's breath hitched. Her mind spun with questions, her emotions pulling in different directions. Was this love? Or was it something else? Was this the beginning of something beautiful or the start of something complicated? She did not know. But she knew this. What she had seen could not be unseen. And so, while the movie's story unfolded on the giant screen, another story had begun in the quiet rows of the theater. A story filled with respect, humility, resilience, and kindness, but also with suspense, questions, and emotions so strong they could not be ignored. The night had only just begun. The theater grew darker as the film reached one of its dramatic scenes, but inside Sandra's chest, a different kind of drama was already unfolding. Her eyes were not on the screen. They were fixed on the way Anna's fingers lingered around Keanu's hand, the way his calm presence steadied her trembling. The world around them might not have noticed, but for Sandra, every second felt sharper, heavier, almost impossible to ignore. It was not jealousy that filled her heart, but something more complicated. It was the weight of surprise mixed with the ache of history. Sandra knew Keanu's soul better than most. She knew the quiet battles he had fought, the silent grief he carried, the resilience that made him stand tall even when life gave him reasons to collapse. He was a man who gave more kindness than he ever received, and seeing him sit so close to Anna, offering her that same gentleness, stirred 1,000 memories inside her. The hook of the moment was not in the love itself, but in the questions it raised. Why Anna? Why now? Why in this quiet theater, away from the bright eyes of the world? Sandra leaned back, but her heart leaned forward. She watched the way Keanu tilted his head slightly, listening to Anna with complete attention. He was not the type of man who offered half of himself. When he gave everything. And Anna, sitting there with her eyes glowing in the dim light, seemed to be receiving that gift as though she had been waiting for it her whole life. The suspense deepened when Sandra noticed something unusual. Anna's smile would appear and then vanish quickly, like sunlight behind shifting clouds. Her hand tightened on Keanu's, but every so often, she glanced around as if afraid someone might see. There was a fear in her movements, subtle but undeniable. Sandra felt a sudden chill. This was no ordinary closeness. This was something layered, something carrying both comfort and hidden storms. The audience in the theater laughed at a scene on the screen, but Sandra barely heard it. Her own thoughts roared louder. She remembered a moment years ago when Keanu had spoken to her about trust. Sometimes, he had said softly, the world sees only the surface, but the real battles are fought where no one is looking. Those words returned to her now, almost hauntingly. Was this one of those unseen battles? Anna leaned closer to Keanu, whispering something so low that Sandra could not hear. But what struck her was the way Keanu's expression shifted. His calm eyes flickered with concern. His jaw tightened for just a second, and then he gave a small nod, as though promising something important. The hook pulled deeper. What promise had been made in that whisper? What silent vow had just been spoken between them? Sandra's mind began to race, but her heart told her to wait. Respect meant giving space. Kindness meant not rushing to judgment. Resilience meant holding back even when curiosity burned like fire. So she stayed, even as her pulse hammered in her ears. Keanu shifted slightly in his seat, his hand now resting protectively over Anna's. It was a gesture not of possession, but of shield. He had always been that way, shielding others, taking on their burdens, carrying their storms as though they were his own. But then came the twist that tightened everything inside Sandra. Anna's eyes filled with tears, quiet and sudden. She tried to blink them away, but Sandra saw the shimmer, saw the way her shoulders shook just slightly, as though holding back something heavy. Keanu leaned closer, whispering again. And this time Anna nodded, pressing her lips together as if holding a secret inside. Sandra's breath caught. This was no ordinary night. This was no ordinary closeness. This was a story that carried weight, a story that would not remain hidden for long. The movie's credits had not even begun, but Sandra already knew that the true story was happening in silence, in whispers, in the trembling of hands and the glistening of unshed tears. And she also knew something else. Sooner or later, she would have to decide whether to step forward into this story or stay in the shadows and watch as it unfolded without her. For now, though, she sat still, her heart heavy with suspense, her mind echoing with one question. What truth was Keanu? And Anna hiding that no one else was meant to see? The night was not over. It was only beginning. The theater lights slowly began to rise as the movie ended. One by one, people stood, stretching, whispering, collecting their belongings. The hum of casual conversation filled the space. Yet for Sandra, the world was silent. Her eyes remained, locked on Keanu and Anna. They did not move at first. While everyone else shuffled out, they stayed seated, almost as if they were waiting for the crowd to leave before stepping back into reality. Sandra's heart thudded in her chest. Something about their stillness spoke louder than words. The hook of the moment was clear. What were they waiting for? Anna finally turned to Keanu, her face soft but strained, her eyes carrying the shine of emotions unspoken. Sandra caught the faintest tremor in her lips as though she wanted to speak but could not find the strength. Keanu leaned closer, his calm presence wrapping around her like a shield. He murmured something, and Anna nodded, though her eyes still looked as though they carried storms. Sandra gripped the armrest of her chair, torn between respect for their privacy and the aching pull of curiosity. She had always believed in kindness and in giving people space. Yet tonight, something felt different. Something inside told her that what she was witnessing was not just about love or closeness. It was about something deeper, something hidden, something fragile that could break if left alone. As the last of the audience left, Sandra rose slowly to her feet, her mind racing. She did not approach them, not yet. She simply stood in the back row, waiting, watching. Keanu and Anna finally stood. Their movements were unhurried, deliberate. Anna clutched her small purse tightly against her chest, as though it carried not just belongings, but secrets. Keanu placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, guiding her gently toward the aisle. Then it happened. Anna stumbled slightly, her steps faltering as though her legs carried too much weight. Keanu caught her instantly, his arm wrapping around her, holding her close. The gesture was protective, instinctive, but also filled with tenderness. And in that fragile moment, Sandra saw it clearly. Anna was not simply nervous about being seen. She was struggling with something far heavier, something that touched the soul more than the surface. Sandra's breath hitched. The hook grew sharper. What burden was Anna carrying that made her tremble even in Keanu's presence? They moved toward the exit. Keanu's steady steps guiding her, his head lowered slightly as if trying to shield her from the world. Sandra followed at a distance, her mind caught between the pull of compassion and the fear of intruding. Outside, the night air was cool. The street lamps glowed softly, casting long shadows across the pavement. The city hummed faintly in the distance, but here, outside the quiet theater, time seemed to slow. Anna drew a shaky breath, her hand still clinging to Keanu's. She whispered, "Something?" Her voice too low for Sandra to hear. Keanu stopped walking. He turned to her, his face filled with an intensity that Sandra recognized instantly. It was the look of someone ready to carry another's burden without question. Sandra froze in the shadows, her heart pounding. Anna's voice broke through the stillness. This time, it carried just enough for Sandra to hear a single sentence. "I don't know if I can face this alone." The words struck Sandra like thunder. They were not about romance. They were about fear. They were about resilience crumbling, about a heart reaching out for strength. Keanu pulled her gently into his arms, his voice calm but firm. "You won't face it alone. Not while I'm here." The suspense deepened. What was this "it" that Anna feared so much? What truth lay hidden beneath those trembling words? Sandra stepped back, her heart torn. She had never been one to pry into the lives of others, but something about this moment felt different. It was as if the universe had placed her there not by chance, but by purpose. Perhaps she was meant to see. Perhaps she was meant to understand. Anna pulled away slightly, wiping at her eyes. "But what if they find out?" she whispered, her voice fragile. Keanu shook his head, his tone steady. "Then let them. Kindness will always be stronger than judgment." Sandra's breath caught again. Those words echoed everything she had always admired in Keanu. His humility, his resilience, his belief that kindness was not weakness but strength. Still, the mystery deepened. Who were they? What secret weighed so heavily on Anna that it brought tears even in the quiet safety of Keanu's presence? The hook had never been sharper. The night carried questions that demanded answers, and Sandra knew one thing. Her part in this story was no longer passive. She would not walk away. For the first time that night, she stepped forward, her footsteps soft but steady. Keanu and Anna turned, their eyes widening slightly as they saw her emerge from the shadows. The silence between them grew thick, heavy, filled with unspoken truths. And Sandra, with her voice calm but her heart racing, finally spoke. "I saw everything." The air stilled. Anna's lips parted, her face pale. Keanu's calm eyes held steady, though Sandra saw the flicker of something deeper. Something that hinted at the storm that was about to unfold. This was no longer about a chance meeting in a theater. This was about secrets, resilience, and the power of truth. The night had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. The air outside the theater felt sharper now, almost electric, as if the city itself sensed that something important was unfolding. Sandra stood just a few feet away from them, her words still hanging in the night air like a fragile thread. "I saw everything." Anna froze, her eyes wide, her face paling under the dim streetlight. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Keanu's calm presence never wavered. Yet his eyes carried a quiet intensity, as though he had been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. The hook was immediate. What would they say? What truth would they reveal now that the silence had been broken? Sandra took a slow step closer, her voice soft but steady. "I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't just walk away after what I saw. It wasn't just two people sitting in a theater. There's something heavier here, isn't there?" Anna's hands trembled as she clutched her purse tighter. Keanu gently placed his hand over hers, steadying her shaking fingers. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke louder than any explanation. Sandra's heart tightened. This was not about judgment, not about betrayal. It was about something fragile and hidden, something that needed to be handled with care. Anna's voice finally broke the silence, though it came out as a whisper. "We didn't mean for anyone to see us. Not like this. Keanu's calm voice followed, low and grounding. We weren't hiding from you, Sandra. We were hiding from the world. The suspense deepened instantly. What could be so heavy that they needed to shield themselves, even in a quiet, half-empty theater? Sandra's eyes softened. She had known both of them in different ways. Keanu, through years of trust and friendship. Anna through fleeting moments in Hollywood's busy circles. Yet seeing them together like this, raw and unguarded, made her realize she had never truly known the storms they carried. Then let me understand, Sandra said, her voice trembling slightly, though her gaze held steady. Anna's eyes glistened. She looked at Keanu as though asking permission, as though afraid that speaking the truth aloud might shatter everything. Keanu gave the faintest nod, his calm reassurance wrapping around her like a shield. And then, slowly, carefully, Anna spoke. There are people who don't want me here, she whispered. Not in the way you think, not just in films or in the spotlight. There are people who believe I don't belong, and they've made sure I feel it every single day. Her words were heavy, carrying the weight of battles fought in silence. Sandra felt her heart ache. She knew too well how cruel the world could be, how voices of doubt and judgment could break even the strongest spirits. That's why, Anna continued, her voice shaking now, we come to places like this, quiet places, away from the cameras, away from the whispers, because it's the only time I feel safe. It's the only time I can breathe. The hook tightened further. This was no ordinary secret. This was a fight for resilience, a struggle against unseen shadows that threatened to swallow her whole. Sandra's chest ached as she listened. She thought of her own past, the times when she had felt crushed under the weight of judgment, the times when she had smiled on camera while breaking inside. Suddenly, the pieces began to fit. Keanu's voice entered then, calm but steady, carrying the same strength that had comforted Sandra years ago. She's not asking for pity. She's asking for space, for kindness, for a chance to heal without being torn apart by those who don't even know her. Sandra swallowed hard. She understood. But understanding was not enough. She needed to decide. Would she step into their circle of trust, or remain an outsider who simply observed? Anna's trembling eyes met Sandra's. Please, don't tell anyone you saw us. The request cut deep. It wasn't just about privacy. It was about survival, about holding on to something fragile in a world that often had no mercy for vulnerability. Sandra felt her throat tighten. She could not walk away. Now. She could not carry this knowledge and pretend it meant nothing. I won't, she said softly, her voice steady but her heart heavy. But I want you both to know something. You don't have to carry this alone. Anna's lips quivered, and for the first time that night, a tear slipped down her cheek. Keanu squeezed her hand gently, his calm presence never faltering. The hook sharpened once more because in that moment, Sandra knew. She was now part of their hidden story. And once you step into a story like this, there is no going back. The night deepened around them, filled with silence, with questions, with unspoken promises. The truth had only begun to surface, and Sandra could feel it. This was just the beginning of something far more powerful, something that would test respect, humility, resilience, and kindness in ways none of them were ready for. The city lights glowed softly behind them, but in the quiet of that street, 3 lives had shifted forever. The night wrapped around them like a heavy curtain. The street was nearly silent, only the hum of a distant car engine breaking the stillness. Sandra stood with Keanu and Anna, her heart pulled into a storm she had not expected when she walked into the theater earlier that evening. Anna wiped at her tear-streaked face, embarrassed but unable to stop the trembling in her hands. Keanu remained steady, his calm presence anchoring her, but his eyes carried something heavier than he wanted to admit. Sandra noticed it instantly, the flicker of weariness in his expression, the quiet exhaustion of someone who had been carrying, more than anyone knew. The hook was sharp now. What was Keanu carrying that he had never spoken about? "I'm sorry you had to see this," Anna whispered, her voice cracking. "We didn't want anyone to know. We didn't want this to become another story for people to twist." Sandra shook her head gently. "This isn't something to apologize for. I've known pain. I've known what it feels like to hide behind a smile so no one asks questions. What I saw tonight wasn't weakness. It was strength trying to survive." Her words hung in the air. For the first time, Anna's shoulders loosened slightly, as though a weight she had been carrying alone was shared for just a moment. Keanu looked at Sandra then, his gaze filled with gratitude, but also with something unspoken. Sandra could almost hear the words he didn't say. Thank you for seeing her the way she needs to be seen. But before the silence could settle, Anna's voice broke again, softer this time, almost trembling. "They've been following me." The words landed like a thunderclap. Sandra's breath caught, her eyes widening. "What do you mean, following?" Anna lowered her gaze, gripping Keanu's hand tightly. "Messages, cameras, people outside my door, not fans, something darker, people who don't want me to rise, people who think if they can break me, I'll disappear quietly." The hook pulled even tighter. This was not just about privacy anymore. It was about fear, about survival. Keanu's jaw tightened, his voice steady but filled with quiet fire. "I've been protecting her as best as I can, keeping her out of sight, keeping her grounded, but it's bigger than me now." Sandra's chest ached. She had known Hollywood to be cruel, but this was another level of cruelty. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why carry this alone?" Keanu's eyes softened. "Because the world doesn't always listen to truth. It listens to noise. And we didn't want her truth to be drowned in lies." The weight of his words pressed against Sandra's heart. She understood him too well. There were times when she herself had been misunderstood, her truth overshadowed by headlines and whispers that never told the whole story. Anna's tears returned, her voice breaking. "I'm so tired, Sandra. So tired of running. So tired of feeling like I don't belong anywhere. Keanu keeps me strong, but I keep wondering if one day even he won't be enough." The silence that followed was unbearable. Sandra stepped forward, her voice trembling but filled with resolve. "Then let me stand with you, both of you. You don't have to fight this battle in silence. Kindness isn't meant to be hidden. Resilience isn't built alone. I won't let you carry this without me." Anna looked at her with wide, tearful eyes, disbelief flickering in her expression. You do that?" "Of course," Sandra whispered. "Because I know what it feels like when no one stands up for you. And because Keanu once stood by me when no one else did. I owe him. I owe both of you." Keanu's calm eyes softened even further, his quiet gratitude almost overwhelming. "You don't owe me anything, Sandra. But if you choose to stand with us, it will mean more than you'll ever know." The hook tightened once more, because in that moment, a silent pact was formed between them. Not just friendship, not just loyalty, but a bond forged in the fire of resilience and trust. The night around them seemed to grow darker, but within that darkness, a light began to glow. Three souls, bound not by circumstance, but by choice, standing together in the face of fear. Yet even as this fragile circle formed, Sandra felt it, the sense that their fight was only beginning. The whispers outside the theater, the shadows that followed Anna, the burdens Keanu carried in silence, all of it pointed toward a storm much larger than any of them could imagine. And though she did not know what would come next, she knew one, truth, with absolute clarity. Whatever storm was waiting, they would face it together. The night stretched on, and the three of them remained together on that quiet street, bound by a truth too heavy to ignore. The city's lights flickered in the distance, but for Keanu, Anna, and Sandra, the world had shrunk to this fragile circle of trust. Anna's voice broke the silence first. "I don't know how much longer I can take this," she whispered, her words trembling. "Every time I walk outside, I feel eyes on me. Every time the phone rings, I wonder if it's another message. I'm trapped even in places that should feel safe." Keanu squeezed her hand gently, his voice calm but steady. "You're not trapped. Not while I'm here, and not now that Sandra's with us." Sandra's heart ached. She saw the way Anna's body leaned into Keanu for strength, the way her tired eyes held both fear and hope, and she saw the quiet exhaustion in Keanu's face, the weight of carrying not only his own battles, but hers as well. The hook of the moment was sharp. How far were they willing to go for each other? Sandra stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Anna, listen to me. The people who want to silence you only win if you hide. But you don't have to fight them with anger. You fight them with truth, with resilience, with the kindness that makes their cruelty powerless. And you don't have to do it alone anymore. You have us." Anna's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. Tears of relief, of being seen. For so long she had carried her burden in silence, and now someone else had stepped into the storm with her. "But what if it gets worse?" she asked softly. "What if standing up makes them come after me harder?" Keanu looked at her, his calm gaze steady as ever. "Then let them come. Storms will always rise, but storms also pass. What matters is who stands beside you when the sky is darkest." "And I'm not going anywhere," Sandra added softly. "Neither am I." Anna broke then, the tension inside her shattering. She leaned into both of them, her sobs quiet but raw. It was not weakness. It was release. For the first time in so long, she was not carrying the weight alone. The hook deepened further when Keanu pulled back slightly, his voice low but filled with a strength that made Sandra's chest tighten. "This isn't just about protecting Anna, it's about changing the story, about proving that resilience, humility, and kindness are stronger than fear. People don't need to see us hiding in theaters. They need to see us standing together. Unbroken." Anna's breath caught. "But how?" Sandra smiled faintly, her eyes shining. "By living openly. By refusing to let fear write your story. I've been in this business long enough to know. People will always talk. But what stays with them isn't the gossip. It's the moments of truth that shine brighter than the noise." The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't heavy with fear. It was filled with quiet resolve. Anna wiped her eyes, her voice steadier. "So we face this. Together." "Together," Keanu echoed, his tone calm but unshakable. Sandra nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "And when the world looks at you, Anna, let them see not someone broken, but someone who stood through the storm and didn't fall. Let them see the strength they tried to crush but couldn't." The three of them stood there, their shadows stretching long under the streetlight, a silent promise binding them, and then came the final hook, an unexpected twist of peace. Anna's phone buzzed in her purse. She stiffened instantly, her body tense, expecting another cruel message. But Keanu gently reached for it, unlocking it with her permission. He read the screen, his calm expression softening into something almost like relief. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't hate. It was a message from someone unexpected, a young fan. The words were simple, but powerful. "Thank you for being yourself. You don't know how much your strength inspires me." Anna's lips parted, her breath catching. She looked at Keanu, then at Sandra, and finally at the glowing phone in her hand. The storm outside her world had been loud, cruel, and heavy. But here, in the quiet night, she realized something she had almost forgotten. Kindness was still out there. Hope was still alive, and in that moment, she smiled through her tears. Not because everything was fixed, but because she finally believed it could be. Sandra placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. See? Even in the darkness, someone is watching. Not with judgment, but with gratitude. Don't ever forget, you are not invisible. Your light is reaching people you may never even meet. Keanu's calm voice followed, his words carrying the final note of truth. And that's what matters. Not the ones who try to break you, but the ones who are lifted because you chose to stand. The night settled then, the storm within each of them quieting. They stood together, three souls bound by kindness, resilience, and humility, knowing the road ahead would not be easy, but no longer fearing it, because when storms rise and shadows follow, the answer is simple. Stand together and let kindness be the light that cannot be silenced. The story was not ending, it was only beginning.